Well, a treat for me today to be with someone who I've learned a lot about in the last couple of years and certainly have admired a great deal. Dr. Nathan Bryan, Dr. Nathan S. Bryan, S I learned just recently stands for Scott, is a scientist and at the heart of everything clinical and medical. But he's really interested in how do we have not only better lives, longer lives, but better lives. And it's his work in science that has really caused him to do some things that, frankly, are not in the traditional spectrum of things that people in medicine do today. And we're here to talk to him today about how our modern lives are impacting human health, in particular, our approach to healthcare. And his approach is one of prevention and vitality versus detection and treatment. And I think that's an important reversal, but one that I think is hard to do in terms of swimming against the tide of all the institutional mechanisms in place to finance and to fund research, and everything seems to be against, not deliberately and not in a way to be detrimental, but it's just not how we're structured. So, Dr. Nathan, welcome. Welcome to our conversation today.
Well, thanks, Jim. It's great to be with you.
So I find your story intriguing, and what I'm most intrigued by, Dr. Nathan, is that you not only talk the talk, you walk the walk. And I've heard you on other shows talk about your own lifestyle. Take me back to you've been in science your whole life. You went to the University of Texas. You got your degree, your undergraduate degree there in biochemistry, and then you went. I don't know how you did this, being a Texan. And then you went to LSU. I don't know who you cheered for in sports there. Maybe you were just quiet for a while.
Yeah.
And then you wound up doing your postdoctoral work up at Boston University at the School of Medicine there. So you've been around the horn. But I remember you talking about a chance encounter, I think it was at LSU, where you came across a recent Nobel laureate who had discovered this thing called nitric oxide and its impact on our bodies at a cellular level. Was that the turning point for you in terms of career direction?
I think so. It was certainly a pivotal moment, but I'd always been interested in science and medicine. When I was at University of Texas undergrad, I had a chance to do undergraduate research and really fell in love with basic science. And because what I realized is you could ask any biological question and then design experiments to get an answer. And, it may not be the answer you're looking for, but it certainly gives you answers. But then when I was at LSU School of Medicine in Shreveport, this was right after the Nobel Prize had been awarded for the discovery of nitric oxide. And I just remember nitrogen-based chemistry from my inorganic chemistry and then physical chemistry. And I, made a pledge to myself I never wanted to deal in nitrogen-based chemistry again once I got my undergraduate degree. And I think God has a sense of humor. And so, yeah, once I learned about nitric oxide from Lou Ignarro, one of the guys who shared the Nobel Prize, and learned his discoveries and how important this critical molecule was, it certainly kind of directed my research toward understanding how the human body makes this molecule. Because Dr. Ignarro told me, he goes, Nathan, if we can figure out how to restore the natural production of nitric oxide, it'll change the world. It'll change the landscape of medicine. It'll change really the conversation and the practice of medicine, because every single age-related chronic disease is associated with a loss of nitric oxide production. And so that was a very profound statement, especially to a young student, ambitious student, to make important discoveries. And, so yeah, I would agree that was kind of what led me on this path, now this 30-year, 25-year path on studying nitric oxide.
Here you are, the evangelist, to bring this information to the world, to the whole science community. And you're so good at it, and you've been so effective with the books you write, the appearances you've done, the lecturing you do. I think you travel a great deal to bring this message to the world. Are you pleased with how it's going, or are you surprised that 25 years later, you're still sort of the least the loudest voice in this community?
Well, look, we're making progress, but Rome wasn't built in a day, and
Mhm.
we have to really reverse and correct the record on a lot of things that we were misinformed on by the medical community and the so-called experts on what causes chronic disease and how do you treat it, prevent it, and even cure it. So, 25 years later, we're still trying to bring about global awareness around nitric oxide. So I think we're making progress here. But my frustration is, as the awareness grows, other companies enter this space and start promoting and advertising and marketing nitric oxide products. And it's going back to misinformation because these companies are out there trying to capitalize on a growing market, but they don't understand the science, and they're putting products out there that do not and cannot restore nitric oxide production in the human body. So again, I think
So
it's a mixed
you
bag.
can't introduce nitric oxide, but you can introduce ways of the body producing its own.
Yeah. So what's happening is we number one, first we had to understand how does the human body make nitric oxide? What are the production pathways? And
Hmm.
so you can't start developing products until you understand how the body naturally produces it. And so we've understood that. And then we got to understand, okay, what leads to a loss of its production? What leads to a dysfunctional enzyme? What leads to oral dysbiosis? That both of these lead to a loss of nitric oxide production. And if you don't understand that, then you can't start developing product technology or drug therapy to address the deficiency. And unfortunately, companies out there who really have no science background or no scientists on staff to help develop and formulate and address the root cause of nitric oxide deficiency, they just don't have the knowledge and the information to develop safe and effective products. So I think the awareness around nitric oxide is growing because I'm certainly been an evangelist now for 30 years, and other people are talking about it, but we have to make sure that the science is delivered in a way that's truthful and actual so that consumers understand what they're doing that may be leading to a loss of nitric oxide production. But more importantly, I think so they can make educated, informed decisions on products that may or may not work for them or may not be suited for them.
And is there any regulatory body that would look at people who are bringing product to markets that would comment or weigh in on their efficacy?
Certainly for drug therapy, the FDA, we have to, when we go through and try to get drug approval, we have to not only show safety, but we have to show efficacy for specific indications. And that's a drug. But unfortunately, in the dietary supplement industry, it's the wild, wild west. The Dietary Supplements Health and Education Act allows any company to come in and sell dietary supplements, and they can all say the same thing, right? But you don't have to prove it. You can just it's all about who has the best marketing, and not who has the best product based on real science. And so that's you're an entrepreneur in business. How do you differentiate what you're doing from your competitors? And when you can all say the same thing without having to validate it or having any truth to it, it becomes challenging.
Does that frustrate you that you've been the trailblazer here after the initial science was done and bringing this knowledge to the marketplace? Does it frustrate you that there are people with not quite the integrity that they should have in business that are capitalizing on the awareness that you're creating, but not really benefiting the community they serve?
No, it is frustrating. Look, I invite competition because I think it makes everybody better, and high tide raises all boats. So I encourage it. But here's the challenge, and it's not really the challenge; it's the danger. Because these companies out there who are promoting products and spending tens of millions of dollars a year on advertising and TV and radio and all this, and they provide products that consumers think it's nitric oxide. But when they buy it and they believe the marketing hype and they go, well, Nathan, I get emails every day from consumers who do this. They go, Nathan, I tried nitric oxide. I bought this product. I saw it advertised on TV, but it didn't help my blood pressure. I didn't have better energy. It didn't help my sexual function, my cognitive function. So nitric oxide doesn't work for me. And that's a very dangerous misinterpretation. It could kill the entire field. And as we start to develop drug therapy, and there's this negative connotation about nitric oxide out there that it's not important, that it doesn't work because these dietary supplements don't work, it creates a greater burden on us to develop safe and effective drug therapy or to continue to push products that are based on real science that are not only safe but efficacious because we understand the root cause of what leads to nitric oxide deficiency. So it is frustrating, but it's in marketing, it's whoever has the most money because you can outspend without any truth behind it.
Now, at some point in the not too recent past, you decided to give up your teaching career to go into become an entrepreneur yourself. And you created a company called N101,
It's N101, yeah. It's one
N101.
N101. So we've got
Uh, I'll be your product sampler here.
yeah,
Uh, it's a so this helps. It's a lozenge. This helps our bodies to produce nitric oxide. It isn't in introducing nitric oxide. It's causing the body to be able to produce it on its own.
that's right. So the difference of what we do is number one, we understand the enzymology. So there's an enzyme in the lining of the blood vessels that makes nitric oxide. And the older we get, the less we make, the less functional that enzyme becomes. We also have oral bacteria that are responsible for the production of nitric oxide. So we had to develop, in 2007, my research group published the first paper showing that nitric oxide is actually a hormone. And so when you start to develop product technology, this is hormone replacement therapy. So no different than men who are getting
Interesting.
testosterone replacement, or postmenopausal women who are getting estrogen replacement. So
Uh-huh.
it's the same strategy. So we don't give men DHEA or pregnenolone and hope their body can make testosterone out of it, because that's the basis of their deficiency. So we
Yes.
have to give you the actual molecule. And that's what we tried to do, is we have to give you nitric oxide gas. But again, nitric oxide, when it's produced in the body, is a gas. And when it's
Uh-huh.
produced, it's gone in less than a second. So how do you deliver a safe and effective, shelf-stable product that delivers nitric oxide gas? And that's been the basis of my discoveries, because we have to do this through an orally disintegrating tablet in that lozenge that you showed. So our whole philosophy is, if your body can't make nitric oxide, then we have to provide it for you. And in most people, they're not able to make nitric oxide. I would say, certainly by the time you're 40, you've lost 50 to 60% of the nitric oxide you had when you were younger. When you're 60 to 70, you've lost.
So it sounds like it's an obvious contributor to aging.
It is, without a doubt. The loss of nitric oxide precedes the structural changes and all the aspects of aging by many years, decades, in fact. So it's the loss of nitric oxide that's the earliest event in the onset and progression of chronic disease and aging. So we have to restore this molecule. And so we make a solid dose form of nitric oxide gas, and that lozenge is designed to have a resident time of 5 to 7 minutes. So you put it in your mouth, and it slowly dissolves over 5 to 7 minutes. But we're releasing physiological, therapeutic amounts of nitric oxide through that. So that's number one. If your body can't make it, we're providing it for you. But because it's residing in the oral cavity, it's changing the microbiome. It's improving the diversity. It's improving the natural production of nitric oxide. And we understand how to restore the function of the enzyme in the lining of the blood vessels. So we have clinical data on everything that we say on this, and we do randomized placebo-controlled clinical trials to demonstrate that what we say is actually true, and we can demonstrate it through clinically relevant endpoints. So within 20 minutes of taking the lozenge, we've restored the function of the enzyme by 20 to 40%. Within
Wow.
15 or 20 minutes, if your blood pressure is elevated, we bring it down. Within
How much would it come down?
Well, we published a paper in 2011 in a very severe pediatric patient that we were seeing at Texas Children's Hospital. And he was in the pediatric intensive care unit with a blood pressure of 210 over 115. And there was no
Wow.
prescription medication that would normalize his blood pressure. So we started treating with the lozenge, the exact same lozenge that we have today. And within 4 hours, his blood pressure came down to 130 over 80.
Just by taking the lozenge.
Just by taking the lozenge, because we had realized a couple of years earlier, and we published that in Nature Medicine, that these particular patients are completely devoid of any nitric oxide production. So if we give them nitric oxide, could we lead to vasodilation and normalized blood pressure? So that's an extreme case. So we brought his blood pressure down, 80 millimeters of mercury within 4 hours systolic. But we see this, if if you have normal or low blood pressure, it doesn't drop your blood pressure, which is a very important safety consideration.
Yes,
But
I would
we're
think so.
seeing people, with blood pressure of 160 over 90 that are on 3 different prescription medications and still don't have managed blood pressure. They take our lozenge, restore nitric oxide, their blood pressure comes down. And now, for the first time in the history of Western medicine, physician-patient can have a conversation is, okay, how do I get off medication? Because now it's always, okay, if this doesn't work, I'm going to put you on more medication, another medicine. You wake up, you're 40 or 50 years old, you're taking 10, 15, 20 prescription medications a day, and no wonder people are sick and
Yes.
feel bad.
Make this spring one to remember. Have friends over for a Sunday brunch or celebrate special occasions like birthdays and baby showers with delicious food and gourmet gifts. So that brings me to the broader question, Doctor, about how is our modern life impacting our human health, our longevity, and the quality of life? We're living longer. We have more treatments for disease than ever, but we also have more disease than ever. I look at pictures. My father was in the military just at the very end of World War II. But I was just over the weekend looking at some photographs from then. of him back at home at the beach, celebrating being discharged from the service. And they were all skinny people. We're not anymore. What's happened in that 75 or so years, 80 years now, where we've changed as a people?
Well, look, everything's changed. The food that's grown in America, there's data showing that the vegetables and food grown in America from the 1940s compared to the 2010, there's 76% less nutrients in the food grown in America. We've gotten away from crop rotation.
The same broccoli today has 70% less nutrients than it did 80 years ago.
That's exactly right. And, not only that, we're spraying a lot of
But it looks beautiful.
Yeah, look, but it's completely devoid of any nutrients. And as Linus Pauling, who said decades ago that chronic disease is caused from nutrient deficiency, I think that's still true. But I think there's an added component now that we're exposed to toxins that we weren't exposed to, and we're exposed to, things that are disrupting the body. And so, for me, chronic disease occurs from nutrient deficiency and exposure to toxins. We live in a toxic world. The food is sprayed with herbicides, pesticides, and devoid of any nutrients. And then environmental toxicants, and then overuse of antibiotics and killing the bacteria in and on our body, using fluoride toothpaste and putting fluoride in drinking water, and using antiseptic mouthwash, and overusing antibiotics and prescription drug therapy like proton pump inhibitors and cholesterol lowering medication. Look, nobody's getting better. Cardiovascular disease has been the number one killer for more than 100 years, despite billions and billions of dollars in research and investments in this. And to me, that's unacceptable. Because we know
All
what
right, so
is cardiovascular disease.
so
We know how to diagnose it,
take
and we know how to treat it.
take a 50-year-old adult in the U.S. Uh, be prescriptive in terms of their lifestyle. How can they reverse the trends of modern life and its impositions on us from a lifestyle point of view? Maybe take yourself. You're a 50-year-old. What is your prescription for how do you combat that so you get the best of modern life without the negative impacts?
Yeah,
Or
so,
how do you minimize the negative impacts?
yeah, no, look, I've been doing this for more than 30 years, and I figured out what works for me. And I think based on the science, this can work for anybody. So typically, I avoid sugar and simple carbohydrates. I mean, obviously, because we're overfed in America, right? And then I do an 18-hour fast every day. And the data on intermittent fasting and caloric restriction is undeniable. It turns on longevity genes. So if you just eat between 12 and 6 every day and do an 18-hour fast, that completely resets your metabolism. Your hunger pains go away. It increases your metabolic activity, so you start to lose the inflammatory fat
What?
around the.
Excuse me. I heard we're supposed to eat 3 balanced meals a day.
Again, we've been misinformed. But here's the deal: if I wanted to make you sick and chronically dependent upon prescription medication, I would tell you to eat 3 meals a day, snack in between. I would put fluoride in your drinking water, so I'm killing all the bacteria in your body, on your body, shutting down your thyroid function, lowering IQ in kids. I would try to get your cholesterol below 200, where you can't make vitamin D, you can't make estrogen, can't make testosterone, and not exercise, don't sweat, stay out of the sun, put sunscreen on every time you go out. And that's the prescription, that's the recipe for chronic illness. And that's what we.
Well, the last one I've heard you mention some of those before. A couple of new. This sunscreen I hadn't heard you talk about before, but we're more heavily using sunscreens now than ever. Yet the rate of skin cancer is higher than it's ever been.
All you have to do is look at the numbers. What we're doing in Western medicine does not work. And it does not work because it cannot work. Because they're treating the symptoms and creating an environment where you get on the hamster wheel and patients can never get off. But we have to get back to root cause physiology and biochemistry and address the root cause and not treat the symptoms.
Hmm.
But, as you're aware, there's no money in curing. I mean, big pharma,
That's the challenge.
it's a multi-trillion-dollar global business, and the money is in chronic treatment, getting as many customers as you can and keeping those customers as long as you can. That's the basis of any successful company. But they're the best at it, but it's at the expense of our own health. And that's really the big forces we're going up against as we start to develop drug therapy, is going against and trying to change a multi-trillion-dollar industry. And this is a very not only difficult and tough proposition, but it's a very dangerous proposition because you're impeding
Uh,
upon multi-billion dollar, multi-trillion dollar economies and market share.
Listening to you, the couple of things I've changed about my own lifestyle, listening to you over the last couple of years, Dr. Nathan. One is mouthwash. When I heard you first talk about that, I was like, oh my goodness, that's got to be true. But I used mouthwash 3, 4, 5 times a day. Everywhere I would go, I had a bottle of mouthwash. I carried some with me in my backpack.
Yeah.
And you caused me to stop, and it makes all the sense in the world that, especially in the last few years, we're hearing so much about the microbiome. That here we were poisoning the microbiome.
Absolutely. Look, today we know that if you destroy the microbiome, you get chronic disease. Every single age-related chronic disease, from diabetes to inflammatory bowel disease to Alzheimer's, dementia, cardiovascular disease, is associated with dysbiosis. And so,
Dysbiosis.
dysbiosis meaning you're causing disruption in the bacteria. 100 years ago, when I started asking the question, why are we using mouthwash? What started this, and why are we putting fluoride in toothpaste and fluoride in drinking water?
And what answers did you get?
Well, you have to go back more than 100 years, because 100 years ago, it was first described that there's oral pathogenic bacteria that could be cultured in the thrombus in patients that died from sudden cardiac death. So there was translocation of pathogenic bacteria through bleeding gums that became systemic, that caused inflammation and plaque rupture. So the therapeutic solution back then was, oh, these are pathogenic bacteria. Let's kill all the bacteria in the mouth. But
Uh-huh.
understand, we didn't know that there was a microbiome 100 years ago. Today, we know that humans are 10 times more bacterial cells than human cells. And today, we know that if you kill the good bacteria, you cause systemic disease. So now we have to understand that what we did 100 years ago, we can no longer do today because we know better. And that's
Yes.
called innovation and scientific advancement. And so now we have to stop that. And because we and others have published that if you take normal intensive patients, healthy people, and all we do is give them mouthwash twice a day for 7 days, we kill the good bacteria, we decrease nitric oxide production, their blood pressure goes up, and they lose the protective benefits of exercise. I mean, and high blood pressure is the number one driver of the number one killer, cardiovascular disease. So simply by stopping mouthwash, and we've published on this, if you just stop 4 days later, these bacteria are so resilient that they repopulate. You can improve nitric oxide production. And you're
In 4 days after stopping.
4 days after stopping. We published that in 2019.
And you go further to say that I'm assuming you're not invited to speak at a lot of dental schools
Actually,
because you have. Am I wrong?
no, I speak at probably 4 to 6 dental conferences a year. In fact, a couple of years ago, I spoke before the American Dental Association because apparently my voice was loud enough to get the attention of the American Dental Association. There
Tell
was
us
some
about that.
resistance because they still recommend fluoride rinses. They still recommend chlorhexidine for chronic halitosis. And look, my approach is, let's look at the risk benefit, because this one size fits all never works. I don't care what you're doing. But let's look at the risk of chlorhexidine in some patients versus the benefit. And then let's see if we can change course here and create technologies that selectively kill the pathogens, what we're worried about, but doesn't kill the non-pathogenic commensal bacteria. And we can maintain a healthy and diverse microbiome. Because what we're finding is, if we maintain a healthy microbiome and support the good bacteria, you don't have the pathogens, right? Because they act as the police force that don't allow these opportunistic pathogenic bacteria to even take hold. And that's because we're
Mhm.
changing the terrain in the mouth, we're changing the environment that doesn't allow for the proliferation of the bad pathogenic bacteria. And that should be the solution, not creating this perpetual system where you're completely changing the environment and lowering the pH and causing an acidic saliva, which allows then for caries causing bacteria and the gingivitis and periodontal disease causing bacteria. You just change the terrain, you improve health, and you
Well, you,
accelerate
you go,
that.
you've gone further to talk about how, through the result of autopsy, the determination is the mouth is the key to our health. Because you'll say, you give me the data, but I've heard you talk about the preponderance of a dental issue and the discovery of a related cancer.
Yeah, look, health starts in the mouth. And because of oral dysbiosis and translocation of bacteria and just the systemic inflammation that it causes systemic disease. And the teeth are connected to every organ in the body. So if you have a dental infection or a root canal, which is basically a dead tooth because you've removed the nerve supply, you've removed the blood supply, so it's completely isolated from your immune system, then there's meridians that go back to traditional Chinese medicine that thousands and thousands of years. And if you disrupt voltage and electrical flow through those meridians, then you create an environment of low pH, low voltage, low oxygen. And we call that the Warburg effect. And that's where cancer cells grow, proliferate, and replicate. And it's the primary cause of most solid tumors.
So if you had a bad tooth, is it better to get a root canal or have it removed and put in a post?
Look, I'm not never. I mean, in some cases, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to sterilize a root canal tooth. So there's always remnant bacteria in there. So I think it's best to remove the tooth, extract the tooth, clean up the infection, and then make sure that you have enough jawbone, a good integral jawbone, to where that would support an implant. And
Yep.
sometimes, depending upon the severity of the infections, you've got to do a bone graft to regrow the bone that would be suitable to support an implantation. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, most traditionally trained dentists don't understand this. And it's an emerging field, but this goes back to the days of Weston Price, uh,
Yeah.
to understand this. But you just have to find the right dentist. Your dentist can be your best friend or your worst enemy. If your dentist is
So what
doing root canals and doing fluoride rinses and using mouthwash, then they can be your worst enemy.
so what kind of reception did you get at the American Dental Association?
Look, it was a very welcoming reception because we present data. I mean, you can't
Yeah.
argue with data, and you have to start to reconsider what you're doing in dental medicine. Because dentists are obviously only involved in treating the mouth, but there's consequences to what they do on the systemic problem. That's the problem with this siloed, specialty of medicine. Cardiologists only look at the heart, neurologists at the brain, and GI docs only at the gut. But they forget the heart's connected to all that. The brain's connected to everything else. And symptoms and disease manifest differently in different people, but there's usually a single cause.
So tell me, if you would, a little bit about when did you decide to go into business, create your own company, to bring products to the market? When was that? How's it going? Are you happy with where you are?
It was 2006. I was a assistant professor of molecular medicine at UT Medical School in Houston, and I'd made a lot of discoveries. We were filing invention disclosures through the Office of Technology Management, and then submitting patents. Patents were starting to be issued, and so I'm not trained in business. I'm a scientist by training. But in academia, the traditional model is they take your technology and license it to an existing company, and then the
Yep.
university and the inventor receives royalties on that commercialization. But understand, 20 years ago, there wasn't a lot of companies interested in nitric oxide, so there was no company out there interested in licensing my discoveries. And I waited for 2 years, and I was like the university. I would go to the university and I go, "What are we doing with these discoveries? How are we going to monetize it? And how are we going to productize it?" And they didn't have an answer. So after 2 years of frustration, I went out and tried to find investors. And I go, "Look, if this is to be, it's up to me." So I started my own company, and then I took charge of it. And I tried to do this maintaining full-time faculty position and starting and running a company. And I just realized over time that a man who chases many rabbits catches none, right? The old saying. So I had to either focus on my academic career because it was suffering from grant funding and just focusing on there, or focus on entrepreneurship and building a company that we could, translate the discoveries we'd made into safe and effective product technology. So in
Mhm.
2015, I stepped aside and resigned from my full-time faculty position and became a full-time entrepreneur because I'd learned a lot in this process that I didn't ever want to put the direction of the company in the hands of people who didn't share the same passion and understand the science. So that's when I go, I will never abdicate my role as chairman CEO of the companies because I dictate the direction, the strategy, and the execution of that based on science, not based on profit. I want
Mhm.
to develop products that are based on real science that always have an effect that we can demonstrate through randomized placebo-controlled clinical trials.
And what's the range of products now? The name of the company now is?
Well, our parent company is called Bryan Therapeutics because we're more than a dietary supplement company. We're a biotechnology company. We've got drugs we're developing through the FDA. We've got supplements, the N101 lozenge. We make a fermented beet powder that we use as a pre-workout. And as an energy product, we've developed an entire skincare line of products for aesthetics and beauty. We make a topical nitric oxide for the skin, dual chamber. You mix them together, it releases nitric oxide on the surface of the skin.
Is that right?
Yeah, no, it's amazing.
And who should use that?
Anybody who's interested in healthy skin and wanting to reverse the signs of aging and not look old. I mean, obviously we can't do anything about our chronological age, but we can certainly affect our biological age and how we look, because people that are 30 or 40 years old, they look 50 or 60, and there's people who are 60 or 70 years old that look 40 or 50.
That's
So
right.
we understand how to restore circulation, blood flow, oxygen delivery to the skin, mobilize stem cells, improve cellular turnover, improve collagen deposition. And so our skincare products should be used by anybody who wants to reverse the effects of aging on the skin. And then obviously we make a toothpaste because we understood what these bacteria like in terms of the environment. So we make a toothpaste, a fluoride-free hydroxyapatite-based toothpaste that completely changes the oral microenvironment, the microbiome.
How does it change it?
Well, number one, we focus on how do we change the terrain in the oral cavity? What did these bacteria like in terms of improving their populations and number? So number one, we have to adjust the pH and normalize the pH of the oral cavity. Number two, we have to feed them probiotics so that they respire. These are facultative anaerobes that if oxygen's around, they'll use oxygen. If oxygen's not around, they respire on nitrogen. And then we put things in there that allow for this community of bacteria to repopulate. And what we're finding is when people switch from their fluoride-based toothpaste to our non-fluorinated toothpaste that focuses on targeting the microbiome, we see their nitric oxide production go up and we see their blood pressure come down. So we're getting people off prescription medication just by switching to our toothpaste because we're improving the natural production of nitric oxide, changing the environment in the oral cavity, and basically improving the natural production. And then when you combine the toothpaste with the lozenge and restore the function of the enzyme in the lining of the blood vessels, this is like your foundational nitric oxide system.
You travel a great deal, and I'm curious, someone who travels a bit myself, I wonder how tough is it for you to sit next to someone on a plane, they realize who you are. When was the last time you didn't get 100 questions?
Yeah, and it's happening more commonly now. And instantly I'm sitting next to this person, they're pulling out the lozenge and they're taking this lozenge. And, they look on the lozenge, they look at me and they go, "Is this you?" Yeah. No, but it's good because I think it tells us we're making an impact. We're getting the word out there, and people are starting to make these simple changes. Just the elimination of these things, and elimination of sugar and mouthwash and fluoride, and getting off antacids. That completely changes somebody's life because it's released the brakes on the body's ability to make nitric oxide. And if you do the right things, I'm less interested in selling products than providing quality education and information. So you can make these simple lifestyle changes and give the body what it needs so the body makes nitric oxide on its own.
And I have to say, all the times that I've purposely gone and sought your appearances and listened to you on different programs, you do not hawk products. So I'll ask you, if I wanted to find out more, ask you now, I'll ask you again later. But if I wanted to go to your website to learn about your company and the products it provides and what it's good for and how I should be using it, where would I go?
Well, the primary consumer website is n1o1.com. That's the letter N, number one, the letter O, number one.com. So it's one nitrogen, one oxygen for nitric oxide.
Yep.
And then, and then the other is Bryan Therapeutics. We're developing drug therapies.
And Bryan is Bryan.
Bryan, bryantherapeutics.com. And that's our drug development pipeline and company. But the consumer products are n1o1.com.
Well, then how do you think about community, a community of people who have become enlightened by your teaching, who have been deliberate about wanting to change their lifestyle to be healthier and for their families to be healthier? That suggests that there's a yearning on their part to know more, to learn more, and to be part of a community of people that believe in the things that you and your company and your people believe in and are promoting. Does that suggest community arises in that situation?
No, for sure. There's a huge community that's developing of it's kind of resistant now to big pharma because we know that people, and we see these changes all the time, that people are sick and tired of being sick and tired and mismanaged by modern medicine. And so when they
Mhm.
hear this message and they go, just this morning I woke up and they go, Nathan, I heard you on a podcast and everything you said, I do. And it was like an epiphany. And they go, oh my God, I got to stop doing this. And they go, I just stopped using fluoride toothpaste and stopped using mouthwash and weaned off antacids. And he goes, I feel better. The energy, I've never felt this energy. He was a 60-year-old guy. He goes, I feel the energy I had when I was mid 20s and 30s. He goes, and I didn't even buy anything from you. I just stopped doing what you said was leading to. And I go, it's that simple. It's really that
Yeah.
simple. But yeah, people are catching on to this. And, there's nothing more better in terms of marketing than these personal stories. And they go out and say, they tell their family, they tell their friends, and they go, look, I heard this. You got to stop using mouthwash, get rid of fluoride, get off antacids. And, then they have the energy and then they're motivated to exercise. And they do an 18-hour fast, they feel better. And then people, you can change habits if you start seeing results and results, in a short term. And that's what motivates people.
You see it all because of the spot you occupy on the in our community here of the world and of people think about health. What's one of the most overrated health trends that you see? You've talked about light therapy. I've always had a question there, but because you say it's useful, I think you use red light therapy. I have it on my list of things to explore. Uh, but is there something out there you say, boy, if I could use my magic wand and say, no more talk about this, what is it you'd point to?
In the nitric oxide space, I would say the beets, because these companies out there are selling beets and convincing consumers that beets are nitric oxides.
Mm,
It's quite funny. It should be funny, but again, it's a dangerous proposition because, again, consumers think, well, if I take beets, I'm getting nitric oxide. And beets are not nitric oxide. In fact, most of the commercial beet products out there are completely devoid of any basic nutrients or anything that could lead to nitric oxide. We call these dead beets.
really?
In fact, we've used them as placebos in our clinical trials because they're the perfect placebo. They provide zero nitric oxide benefit, and there's companies out there making hundreds of millions of dollars a year selling beets on TV, and they don't work. And you know why they don't work? Because they can't work. And I've tested them, and I've been sued
Mhm.
by some of these companies for telling the truth about them that they don't work.
Have you? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a nasty world out there.
Yeah. If in managing our own health, what should we be doing? Should we be going to get blood work periodically? Should we do that in conjunction with our physician? Is it something we can do on our own? Is there a particular marker we should be paying attention to? Does that change at what stage of life you're at?
I think it's important to test to see where you are. I'm not sure the standard blood work that you get from your primary care doc. I mean, sure, there's some useful things. Like if you've got an elevation in C-reactive protein or ferritin or your triglycerides are elevated or your fasting glucose and insulin levels. That's very important information that you can modify and change and see things. But I think a micronutrient analysis periodically to see what you're deficient in terms of basic nutrients. A toxicology profile of pesticides, herbicides, organic compounds, what you're exposed to, what's toxic in your body is always good. But you have to get a baseline, and then
Yes. But when I go for blood work for my annual work, for my annual physical, and my health system is the NYU Langone Health System. I've had the same primary doc for 35 years. And you see this, oh, you're in the normal range on that. But I always ask, when you say the normal range, normal, who's normal? If that's the existing population, I'm looking around, we don't look particularly healthy.
no, that's exactly right. That's what people don't understand. Well, your labs are normal. Normal is a bell-shaped curve. If you go back from grade school, you graded on a bell shape, so you're within the normal population. But like you, if I look around and see that okay, my labs are normal, which means it's next to my colleagues that's overweight, that's diabetic, that's tired all the time, that has high blood pressure and diabetes, I don't want to be normal. If that's normal, count me out. I want to be
Yeah.
optimal. And that's the problem with these scales have changed over time. Like if you look back 40 years ago, a normal thyroid lab is completely different than what they call normal today
Is that right?
because the curve has shifted because everybody suffers from hypothyroidism. And so what was normal 50 years ago or what's normal today would be completely abnormal 50 years ago because the bell curves changed because the population has changed. So it's
Yep.
not normal. They call it normal. It's not normal. It's common. The common is not normal.
It's common but not normal.
Yeah.
That's the new
I don't
definition.
want to be common. Not at all. I mean, and I don't want to be normal.
So supplements. I'm taking my N101 twice a day now. I was once a day, and then listening to you recently, I saw it twice a day. Then something else on my newest bottle. It said, make sure that I hydrate before taking my lozenge. I hadn't been doing that. I started doing that a couple of days ago, and I got the new bottle with the new reminder on the cap. What else should I be thinking about in terms of supplements?
Again, it comes back to personalized medicine and supplementation. But I think if you look at kind of the NHANES study and what most Americans are deficient in, 75% of Americans are deficient in magnesium. So I take 500 milligrams of magnesium every night before I go to bed. 95% of Americans are deficient in iodine. We need iodine. It's not present in the Western diet. So iodine is important. And then, look at vitamin D. 60-70% of Americans are deficient in vitamin D. Again, they say normal is 50, but optimal is 80. And these are things that are easily measurable in labs that you can track.
Uh-huh.
But that's kind of in terms of supplements. I used to take a handful of supplements and realize that probably didn't need it. I was wasting money and making expensive urine. But I try to
That's my line. It's great coloring.
That's right. Yeah. No, but I take organ meat. I don't eat organ meat, but I make capsules of wild bison organ meat. I take salmon roe for my DHA and fish oils, and then I take an algae, a Krellin spirulina product to try to get these are nutrient dense vegetables or products that provide a lot of micronutrients, and that's really my routine. And I eat a balanced diet in moderation, 18-hour fast every day. I eat I have 700-acre ranch here. I grow my own vegetables. I raise my own beef, so I know what I'm putting in my body is free of any toxins and it's nutrient.
And your vegetables are different nutritionally, nutrition wise, or uh, uh, than what you buy in a supermarket.
Absolutely. What I grow is wouldn't be considered organic because I add fertilizer to the soil. Every year I do soil
Yes.
samples to see, okay, what is my soil?
So, so you're very conscious of the growing medium, what you're growing it in, because that's going to provide all the nutrients.
Absolutely. If the soil doesn't have the nutrients, then there's no nutrients to extract or assimilate in the food we're growing.
Yep.
So your USDA Department of Agriculture local office, well, you can take a soil sample in. They'll analyze it. They'll tell you the soil pH, what nutrients you need, how to customize a fertilizer. So because I add nitrogen-based fertilizer to the soil, my vegetables wouldn't be considered organic. But I do not add any herbicides or pesticides to it. So there's no toxins on my. But the challenge is, it's very difficult to manage because you got to get out there and harvest them before the worms eat the tomatoes and the corns and the gophers eat your potatoes, and so it's a challenge. But it's the best
It's
food.
a, it's a,
The best food out there.
well, all the things you say just make sense, and the fact that you can comfortably sit back and say, "Of course they do," because I rely on data and science. And the way you explain it just makes it so understandable how we got to these siloed uh, 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 medicine delivery systems, the lack of oversight, that we all have to be our own physician in terms of balancing our lives. And you make it very simple. And I like the fact you say these are three things you shouldn't do:
Yeah.
get rid of toothpaste, get rid of the mouthwash, don't overtake by antibiotics. I have concerns about the fourth one there about uh, uh, proton pump inhibitors, but that's for another day.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So, 30 years from now, when you're sitting around with other octogenarians, what are you thankful for about your lifestyle that you did that causes you to be a healthy, vigorous, contributing octogenarian?
Well, I think it's listening to my body and doing what works, what makes me feel good, and because our body talks to us all the time, and if we listen and pivot, then we can maintain good health. If we don't listen to our body, we end up getting sick and dying. But no, I think what I exercise every day. I eat a balanced diet in moderation. I get sunlight exposure, and the just this normal routine, no matter where I am in the world, and maintain good cardiac function and blood pressure and blood flow. I just recently had a clearly scan on my heart maybe a month ago, and 52 years old. I'll be 53 in November. There was no detectable plaque in any of my coronary arteries. And both the radiologist and the cardiologist said they've never seen this before. Even in young
Wow.
kids, there's fatty streaks in the blood vessels of young kids. So they said we've never seen this before.
And is that because you've maintained this lifestyle for a long time, or do you think you've reversed some problems that you might have had from earlier years?
I think I've reversed some damage because I haven't always been this diligent and deliberate about what I'm doing. But I constantly kind of pivot and do that. But here's what I think: what I've been doing now for probably the past 10 years. 18-hour fast. I exercise every day when I get out of bed, whether I want to or not. I do
Yep.
an infrared sauna. I'm doing the cold plunge now 2 or 3 times a week. I get sunlight, and then that works for me. And then I practice nasal breathing. I'm very intentful about my faith and the intentions that I set forth for the day, and that seems to be paying dividends for me because I feel great every morning. I work out. I get out of bed with excitement and exuberance for the day and full of energy. And a lot of people my age don't have that.
Well, I hope you live well beyond your 80s, and I expect you will. We all hear that science is evolving quickly, but I think what you bring is an important reminder that yes, we'll learn more, we will become more siloed and more specialized, but we have to step back and look at the causal effect of all of these things on our bodies and just apply some practical knowledge and not just accept, well, we've been doing that for 100 years. There are other alternatives, and you're a leading voice in that area. I was a fan before we had a chance to speak today. I'm a bigger fan for having had this experience. Thanks for being generous with your time and for doing the work you do and bringing education to all of us. You're making a big difference.
Well, thank you so much. It's conversations like this that hopefully reaches people who need to hear this message. So thank you, Jim, for the work you do and for inviting me on.
Again, it's Bryan, Bryan, therapeutics.com or n101.com. And those are ways we can get your products and learn more about the work you're doing and the work that your team is doing. Thanks so much again, Doc.
Thank you, Jim. Take care.